This is Hannibal from thehannibaltv.com, and on the line I have a very special guest. He's in the new Heel Kick movie, which we had Danny Mac on the show recently. He also had a WWE contract at one point that didn't go through. He's the last Stampede Wrestling North American champion. He was on a reality show with Rowdy Roddy Piper, and he recently appeared on an episode of Impact versus Sami Callihan. He is Ravenous Randy Myers, or whatever you call yourself these days.
That's exactly what I call myself. All those things. So it takes a long time to introduce myself sometimes.
Do you still have a gang of followers like you did in Stampede Wrestling?
Like fan-wise, like a fan base?
No, you used to have, I know it wasn't your booking idea, but you had Dandy Myers and Mama Myers and...
The family. No, we haven't had a family reunion in quite some time, actually. I think that Mama's down south making, she opened a barbecue restaurant down in, Tennessee, I think. And then Dandy's still doing this thing in Calgary, but yeah, we haven't reunited in quite some time.
And didn't Dandy marry the Dynamite Kid's daughter at one point?
That's very true. That is very true.
Yeah. And you actually once dated one of the Hart girls. I don't think you're still together, but...
No, but I did that. Me and Lindsay Hart dated for 9 years or something like that.
And which Hart was she related to?
She's Ben Bastrab's daughter, and Ben Bastrab was married to Allison Hart at one point, and they made babies, and then later I dated one of those babies.
Ben Bastrab, he was apparently a good wrestler. I haven't seen much of him, but I heard he was pretty good and a good trainer.
Yeah, no, definitely. I've heard nothing but good things about his wrestling style.
And also a very bad guy in real life, like bad as in very legit, crazy in certain ways.
Yeah, no, definitely very legit. I would say is a great way to put it.
Yeah. So we talked to Danny Mac, who I guess is the star of the Heel Kicked movie, and he was mentioning that you were his trainer in that movie. And you trained him in real life, too. And I guess he eventually had a match that was live in front of a crowd that airs in the movie. Can you just tell us how you became involved in that?
Well, it was through ECCW, and I was running the training camp at the time. So they were looking for someone who was willing to work with somebody who needed to be trained from scratch, had no previous experience whatsoever, but also needed to be trained well enough to have a match in a certain amount of time. Because there was a certain show that they had to be booked on. I forget how much time it was. I want to say not much. I want to say 3 months.
Okay. That
we had to get them ready for that match. So, that was a tall order. When they're wrestling fans, though, you know what I mean? They knew the names of the moves, which is important, and they knew kind of what moves they wanted to learn, and we didn't need to teach them everything. We just needed to teach them enough to have a match.
How was your training of them compared to the dungeon training that you went through?
Well, there was definitely, I definitely chopped them. I definitely made sure that got in there. It was definitely not nearly as rugged. I definitely have all sorts of flavors into my training, taking all the seminars I have over the years and being trained by a handful of people, but I definitely still got that dungeon core in me, so it wasn't easy.
I think one of my favorite dungeon moments of all time was that kid that kept slapping us all in the ear, and Bruce, for some reason, found it funny to keep calling that in the scenarios that he would have us do. Every time we wrestled that kid, he would slap us in the ear, and then finally
that
one
kid
day,
was so frustrating.
What happened there? You just lost it, and you slapped him numerous times in the ear.
I think I lost it and had maybe some thrown and tossed his way, and I definitely slapped the high holy hell out of him.
And I don't believe he was ever seen again. I liked how that happened often down there. There were people that would show up and then they would just disappear and never be heard from again.
Totally, yeah. They came from out of nowhere and then they returned to out of nowhere. Whatever rock they crawled out of.
So have you seen the Heel Kick movie yet?
No, I am. Yeah, I'm just waiting on my copy, yeah.
Okay, I see. How was the whole experience overall?
I really liked it, yeah. They were really fun to work with, and Danny was... they're very excitable guys, just like anyone is that's a wrestling fan. It's the first time their chance getting into a ring and stuff like that. So that was really fun to work with them. They were obviously new people are frustrated to train sometimes, you know what I mean? and there was like ups and downs, but overall I found them awesome. So it was a good experience. CCW's been really great to like laying out experiences and stuff like that, or like chances for me to take.
It seems like it's going to be a bit of a stoner movie in some ways.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's got like that, I'd say like buddy comedy vibe, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like, yeah. And I do think there's like a slacker element as well. So I think that, yeah, you're right up that alley.
And what do you think of marijuana being legalized now? It's
What,
not officially
well,
legalized yet, but it's almost there in Canada.
I think that's great. I think it's due time. I didn't think it would ever happen, and I'm still like not holding my breath. You know what I mean? Because I don't know, things are weird, but it's awesome. It's so close, and the fact that I live in Vancouver, where it's accessible, is awesome for people who need it for all sorts of pain relief and all those kinds of things, and use as well. Whatever is your jam, go for it.
Now, do you think now that it's going to be legal in Canada and it's already legal in Colorado and Arizona and a few other states, that WWE is going to take it off of their banned substance list because alcohol is not on the banned substance list and it's more dangerous and harmful than weed?
I don't know. I can't speak for WWE, but I can't say that hasn't crossed my mind.
Yeah. Because unfortunately, I don't even think you had it from secondhand smoke or something, but you were signed at the same time as I was signed out of that the tryout camp. We actually had a pretty good match together in that camp, but unfortunately, your contract got rescinded because I think you had a small trace of it in your system, so it really screwed you over.
Yeah, no, that sucked for sure. And that's totally what happened. I had marijuana in my system, and I knew, like, I don't by any means blame them. Like, bad choices on my half and a misunderstanding of how the system was working, because I was told that there was going to be a $500 fine if they found marijuana in my system. And then when it came up, the policy had possibly changed, or maybe I'd misheard them, so I don't put any blame on their end. They put blame on the lifestyle I was living at the time. So.
And yeah, that policy, if that had come into place, it would have been very recently because just a few years prior to that, from what I understand from the Highlanders, it was something like a $500 fine if you were caught with it in your system, and then it became the pre-contract, which I think the pre-contract stuff was only started after the Chris Benoit tragedy. Before that, you would just have your tests shortly after you started with the company or when you were starting to go on the road if you needed to fight somewhere where there was a commission.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I wasn't, but that makes sense.
Since that's fairly minor and it was so long ago, and like, do you think, obviously with my situation, there was a legal situation out of my contract being rescinded, and it was highly controversial, but yours was a very quiet thing, and from what I know, you've never said anything bad about the company, and you've been working hard. You're in better shape than I've ever seen you. You look great in the movie and in your recent appearance on Impact. Do you think there's a chance now that they need more talent, and you have TJ Wilson that's a producer, you have Jinder Mahal who you know very well in there, do you think there's any chance in the future you're going to get a second chance?
Like, I never say never. Lightning doesn't necessarily strike the same place twice, but I think there's like one dude who's been struck by lightning like 30 times, so you never know, right?
Yeah, I always find it funny that Cody Rhodes, when he left, he was saying he never was given a proper chance, but he was given so many chances when you look at someone like us.
No, well, it's just different. Everybody, I think, has their different definition of what a chance is, too.
Exactly. And you had a very good match on Impact against Sami Callihan that is on the Impact Wrestling YouTube channel still, I believe. Did you have any feedback from Impact regarding that match, and what are your thoughts on that match?
Oh, I haven't heard back from Impact, but I love the match myself, and like Sami was like a pleasure to work with, and that Defy audience is incredible, as well as the people who run Defy. It's an all in all like awesome promotion, one of the favorites I've ever worked for, if not my absolute favorite. They're just been so kind to me, the fan base as well as backstage, gotten to work with some great people there, and yeah, looking forward to seeing what 2018 has in store.
And speaking of great people you've got to work with, you were on a reality show with Roddy Piper, who you have a lot of similarities to. But how did that
Yeah,
whole situation come about? And if you could just talk about what it was like being around a legend like that.
cool. Well, it's actually kind of funny how it came about. It was the second season of a show called World of Hurt, which I think only aired in Canada. But it was the idea was the first season was run by Lance Storm, and he had the camp out in Calgary, and so it was like basically a reality show based around his camp. So him running people through 3 weeks of training, or like 3 weeks of tapings, and then they'd have a show, and at the end they'd tape that show, and then they'd cut it up into segments and air. That show was part of a promotion called PWA. They decided to do the final taping as like piggyback on PWA show that night. So they used the PWA ring, and they just had the PWA show happened, and then the World of Hurt show happened afterwards. They're taping for their show, and they wanted to use the takedown ring. They wanted me to sign a waiver saying that I was willing to take down, or like use me as the show to take down the ring. And I wasn't cool with that. I'm like, no, you're not paying me anything. You want my legs, you're gonna have to pay me. Like, otherwise blur out my face. And then they're like, well, no, we can't do that. You have any idea how much money that costs? I'm like, I don't care. Like, you didn't. I was having a little spaz, and I was being a little douche. I'm not denying that. But I had a little spaz, and I'm like, no, there's no way. Like, I didn't get used on your show. Everyone's gonna see the show and just be like, oh, that's a guy who sets up the ring. And I'm more than a guy who sets up the ring. I have no problem setting up the ring, but I don't want to only be known as the guy who sets up the ring. So like, I was like, no. So then when season around, and the producer messaged me and asked me to be on the show, I was like, that's kind of fishy, considering the only interaction I had with any of you people was fairly negative. But then I remembered what reality shows are all based on, and that's drama, and wanting people who are fiery and hot-tempered. And I'm like, oh, that's exactly why they want me on the show.
Well, so that's then, for sure.
Yeah, no, totally, right? So that made sense, especially at the time. I think I've mellowed out with age, but yeah, at the time I was definitely a fiery guy. And then when I found out it was Roddy Piper, I was like, hell yeah, that sounds awesome. I found out how much they were going to pay me and how many hours they were expecting out of us. I think it worked out to like 58 cents an hour or something like that.
Okay. It
was ridiculous. I'm like, okay, what? So I was a little bit fired about that. I'm like, this is how much you guys are going to pay me per hour. This is how much you think my time is worth. And then I was like, I sat back before I was like ready to send that email to them. And then I was like, how much would I pay to spend 3 weeks with Roddy Piper? Instead, I'm getting paid. Sure, it's 58 cents an hour or whatever it was. So I'm like, getting paid to learn from Roddy Piper? I'm like, why am I being such an asshole? I'm like, I'm going to take this opportunity. And I'm so fucking thankful that I did. He was like so cool. Everything you ever heard about him being as rad as he was so pure and just true to everything you hoped he would be. And they say, like, don't meet your heroes, but I've been fortunate enough with, like, Foley and with Roddy Piper to meet my heroes and have them be everything I hoped they were and more.
How did he get along with Lance Storm? Because that seems like an unusual pairing.
Well, they actually weren't on the show together. The first season was Lance Storm, and then the second season they decided to put Roddy Piper.
Okay.
That would have been such an interesting odd couple. That reality show alone, just put them in an apartment and I'd watch that.
Now, what was he like personally when you were hanging around with him off camera?
Like, very kind, like one of the sweetest people I've ever met, and very sincere, very touchy, you know?
Yeah.
Like hug and stuff like that, but not in like a way at all, like in a way you could tell he cared. And also like eccentric and off the wall and over the top and intense, like that that you don't see very often anymore. So it's just raw and real, and like not having any airs about himself, not worrying about what he said or like how people were going to take what he said, just being honest and upfront. Like some have spats, but you knew that they were out of love, right?
Now, knowing Roddy Piper a bit and being familiar with his work, but how he is outside the ring and how he was in the old days, Do you think if he was recruited into like the NXT system, would he have been able to last with his personality the way it was and his wild side?
Oh, that's such a good question. Um, I don't know. Like that old saying that like cream rises to the top.
Yeah.
I think like that it factor is undeniable. Whether he would have been able to handle it, whether he would have stormed out, maybe, or I don't know. I can't say in an alternate reality, but I like to think that he would have made it through because he's just had that it factor. He popped.
Yeah. He just doesn't strike me as the type that would respond well to authority and strict rules.
Agreed, and that's what might have been a harder thing for him. And you know what I mean? That might make it harder for any of those type to get in there.
Now, Jinder Mahal, who I know you worked with a bunch, and he was around when we were in Stampede Wrestling. What do you think of the success he's had lately?
I thought I was over the top. I think that's great. I was excited for him, and I hope they push the stuff he's doing, especially alongside the series. That's so cool to see these guys that I know have been trying for so long and never given up hope and just devoted themselves to the craft and learning more and constantly networking, meeting new people and never giving up that grind. That's awesome. That pays off. That to me says that there's hope in this world. Sometimes you think that it's just all bought or it's not necessarily or hypocrisy. Things that aren't necessarily the right people always getting the right things. But when you see people that personally have busted their asses getting the opportunities that they deserve, you're like, that's rad.
And of course, Harry's doing really well now in New Japan. I think he's on their big January event.
Yeah, and exactly. Harry's doing great. TJ, like you said, is doing the producing. Natty's been doing great stuff. Seeing Tyler Breeze, who I've worked with lots, as Victor even being up there.
Eric's in there too. I don't know what his name is, but he's doing.
Yeah, Rick Victor. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's great, and I'm so happy to see these people getting their opportunities, and people that I know are like I was saying about Piper, just these true people, true blue, bust their ass. I've seen them work small towns and put on killer matches in front of nobody. And I know that they're and have improved so much since then that, they deserve it so much.
And you're not kidding about nobody. From our time in Stampede Wrestling, there were some very lean crowds, to say the least.
Oh, no, for sure, yeah. Especially because we were in an uncool time of wrestling.
Yeah.
Right after everything cooled down, after the Attitude Era. And when UFC was first getting it in surge of being hot, and everyone was over wrestling, and they were in UFC, and then that's when we were we were wrestling in front of these crowds that weren't really as hot as they are now.
I think the lowest point ever was that match that you and I had in Bowness. I forget even the venue, but there was less than 30 people there, and somehow the people that were running the music seemed to have full control of the show at that point.
I remember the things they said the things that they with the music blow our mind.
And Bruce paid TJ, I think around that time, once it changed.
Yeah. That was one by across the street from the Taco Bell, right?
Yes. It was so small you could barely fit the ring in there and one row of chairs.
It was one row of chairs, yeah. And I don't think we filled that up.
No, we didn't. But we learned a lot, obviously.
For sure, yeah. That's what I mean. You've got to cut your teeth and pay your dues, and I think that makes you thicker stocked and tougher. I don't think I'd be where I am today if it wasn't for the training I went through. And I'm very thankful for that. And it was hard, and it did break me at points, but it broke me in ways I needed to be broken. And that might not be right for everyone, but it was right for me.
And Stampede Wrestling, of course, it finished shortly after Stu Hart passed away, the last incarnation. And you are the final North American champion, a title that so many legends in wrestling ended up holding over the years. How did it come about that you became the last the last champion. Obviously, you were very well liked by the Hart family at that time.
Yeah, there was a guy at that point named Bill Bell who was running Stampede Wrestling. Bruce had left the promotion at that point, and Bill had put some money into the promotion and wanted to continue it running. So he was coming to the elder people who had been in Stampede Wrestling for the longest, and I was one of those people at that point. Lots of people else had moved on to bigger or whatever, and I was one of the guys who was still around. So he went to me for the booking, and then so him and me and Dirty Duke Durango were all kind of like working on the booking side of things. And then they put me into this feud with Chris Steele, who was the champion. I had been running with this We Want Pizza thing for a while. I promised when I finally won the Stampede title that I would give the fans pizza. And so the night came where 2 weeks before I got the call from Bill saying that they wanted to put me open for the championship, giving me enough time to order all the pizza. And, I ended up winning the Stampede Wrestling Championship, and then it closed down.
Well, I think by that time, the company was really on its last legs.
It was really, and Bill he'd been pouring money. He'd already invested so much in it to begin with, and then each show things were thin at that time, right? So shows were costing him more money that he was getting out of them. Was always very fair to the boys and always paid them, I think a lot of the time out of his own pocket. And he could only lose money for so long.
Because oftentimes when we weren't really complaining about it because we were training, but when Bruce was running it, sometimes we'd get $5 or less, I believe.
Yeah, totally.
But
I remember getting paid in Alberta Genuine Draft quite a few times.
Yeah, Ross would
just
pay us
one
$50.
beer. I'd get handed one beer, and that would be my payment for the night.
Yeah, I remember once I drove for Calgary to. I may have even wrestled you. We went to it was really far out, some military base, something like that, and it was $50, and there was a snowstorm.
It was brutal.
It was brutal, yeah.
Yeah, that was terrible. We all slept on army cots that night.
Yeah,
and I slept next to in some mess hall, and I slept next to the aforementioned music guy's son, and he was snoring like you wouldn't fucking believe. Clearly, he had crazy sleep apnea.
Oh, yeah, that was an adventure.
Oh, yeah, and there was that Ma Myers, who we had also mentioned previous. She had managed me that night, and she had been claiming to be pregnant, but everyone was kind of questioning that, whether the validity of that. We did a spot where, we did a noggin knocker where our heads got rammed together, and next thing I know, she's blaming me for losing the baby.
Oh, let me guess, that was Bruce's angle.
Yeah, well, I don't know if it was an angle. It was just a thing. It wasn't even mentioned on the shows. It would have been more exciting than anything mentioned on the shows, to be honest. I
like Bruce, but for some reason he liked when he would have us do those scenarios. Often it was, I remember when, I forget if it was Natty or Anna I was having the scenario with, and I was the guy that had gotten the girl pregnant, and I had to try and she wasn't going to have an abortion, so he's fire up and pretend that you're going to kick the baby.
Yeah, you always mention Henry Morgenthaler or something like that. He was a famous abortion doctor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then the girl would fire up.
Colorful.
Yeah.
Very colorful.
Yeah, he's a good trainer in many ways. I'm very glad he taught us the basics, but there was some unique stuff going on down there.
For sure. But looking back, I don't know, that's right up my alley. All that stuff, it was weird at the time, but I kind of don't know if I'd have it any other way, But it was bizarre, and maybe it pushed my boundaries of weirdness and weird sense of humor stuff and what could be possible in the ring. Was a mad scientist,
Yes.
I remember one time you got we're having one where it was one of Bruce's trademark scenarios, and someone mentioned something about mutton chops to you. You guys were down by the bay or something like that. You were meeting this guy who was a boatman, something down by the bay, and he was going to slap the mutton chops off your face, and you were like, what the fuck are mutton chops? And you slapped the shit out of him.
Yeah, there was some interesting stuff. Or who was that guy that always drop-kicked people in the balls because he couldn't get up, and Bruce would always call that spot for us to do?
Just because Kerwin, wasn't it?
Yes. Kerwin.
He would drop-kick you in the almost in the like face with one foot, and the other one would go directly in your balls, just like the spreadest eagle drop kick.
Yeah. Interesting stuff. Very unique form of training.
Definitely, it was the best though. Like there was so many, but then there's also like people like TJ and Harry that you could learn like from their tutelage. They were so young at the time, but they also were like so rich with knowledge at such a young age. Ted being around, all these people that were like, Bruce was definitely the more wild side, but like you said, his basic training was like, you can't knock it. Like it was the best around for sure. Like fundamentals very strong.
What's the best story you could tell us of something unique you've witnessed Ted do? Because I know you knew him very well.
There's like people have like different versions of Ted that they like. I like the weird things that you wouldn't expect from Ted, like the things that he likes. Like he really likes the salted raisins in a trail mix, and so he would always be like, "Oh, I don't like even see the point of a trail mix if it doesn't have like those salted raisins. They're the best part." And he was also big on fancy mustard, and he would. There's no fancy mustard on it, George. Like, what's even the point? And George's mother was like a delicious cook, so he's complaining about no fancy mustard on this like gorgeous meal that I'm sure needed no other sauces or anything like that. So moments like that to me were like funny because they were extreme, but they were also showing like the humanity of Ted and the things that he liked, and that to me is always bizarre.
I'm surprised he hasn't been given a reality show ever, because his life is quite interesting.
There was one. Didn't you see? There was a trailer for one.
Oh, no, I did not.
Incredible. I'll find that for you, and I'll send it your way. Hopefully it's still on YouTube. It looks like he's juggling cats at one point. He's got like 2 girlfriends on his arms at one point. It's like Matter of the Heart or something like that. But it looked
He always had
so
a harem
incredible.
of women, that's for sure.
Totally, yeah. Well, one time he came over to my house and he said, like, I just like my girlfriend has nowhere to put her snake. It's like a pet snake, and she got kicked out of school, so she's gonna need to like put the snake somewhere because it was in the science classroom. And I'm like, oh, okay, sure. So he brings over like this aquarium, and there's no snake in it. And he keeps being like, no, the snake is hiding. And then so I'm like, okay, it's hiding, right? So I'm like, okay, sure, maybe. As soon as he leaves, I'm like looking through the snake and through the cage, and there's no snake. And I'm like, did the snake get out in my house? Like, I don't know if there ever was a snake. I still don't know if there ever was a snake, but I just know there wasn't when I looked.
That's interesting. He's a phenomenal wrestler. It's just too bad he was never really showcased on a major stage.
Totally. He's the best wrestler like I've seen, like pound for pound, and just a guy who can do these moves that are insane looking, but it's so safe, and he's like, which is something you wouldn't necessarily expect.
Yeah, and great
Such
intensity.
precision.
And also he's good at promos, but unfortunately the colorful language gets him sometimes.
Very true. His promos are awesome. Like, if that character was done by anyone else, which I think bits of it has been taken from different people or have used over the years, but like that is the ultimate wrestling character. If you could be like Ted, turned down just from like 55 to like 40 on like a 1 to 10 scale.
So where are you wrestling mainly now for anyone listening that wants to look up the company on YouTube or...
I would suggest looking up for Defy. I'm wrestling for down in Seattle, which is like a reasonably new company. They're starting their 2nd year coming up, and they've just been awesome. Like I said, really incredible to me, as well as ECCW. And we've got our big Commodore show coming up. That is January 20th. Yep, and I'm in the main event there, and I'm taking on my bestest friend in the entire world, Andy the Dreadful Bird.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah.
Is it a human or a bird?
Yeah. It's he's mostly man, I think.
Because I did see you team up with a stuffed animal in one clip.
Oh, yeah, that's probably very true. Yeah, teddy bear. I fought with a teddy bear. This is very true.
A lot of interesting stuff. And actually, we mentioned Jinder Mahal. You were at the very first Great North Wrestling show, wrestling against Jinder Mahal and his
that is very true as well.
Team partner. So one day we'll have to have you back.
I'd love to come back. We had our very first match against each other as well.
We did. We've had
Yeah.
numerous matches together. I believe you were my record up to a certain point.
Yeah,
Of
no, definitely. And like, I think it's funny how our careers were like. I didn't know you. Like, we had our very first match together. Then I didn't know you were going down to that tryout in 2009. We both are down there. We ended up getting paired together. We ended up both getting contracts. They both get rescinded for different reasons. But we're both still trudging along and both wearing eye makeup now. So I think that's what's really important
Oh no,
overall.
that I don't wear eye makeup. I just don't
Oh,
sleep very often, and
oh, really?
my
Okay.
eyes have become like that.
I'm just filthy, so that's where mine comes from.
I see. And both of us will go on to eventually break through the mainstream and become massive stars. That just hasn't
Indeed, and then
happened
we'll
yet.
wrestle each other at WrestleMania, and it'll all come full circle.
Exactly. And
Only
for
there'll only be one row at WrestleMania, and it'll be in Bonus.
yeah, well, actually, that Boness match that was quite something. I ended up getting a WWE tryout out of that match because I sent that
See?
match to Tommy Dreamer, and he called me for tryouts in Toronto and Montreal because of
You're
that
welcome.
match. Yeah, exactly. So it wasn't a bad match. It was just like there was nobody there, and as I said, for some reason, I ended up getting kicked out of Stampede for 2 months out of that match because I made the kid cry of his parents were the DJs or something. But it's like a
Yeah,
heel
there's
making a
no
kid
excuse.
cry, he's fired.
Yeah, I remember
Doesn't make any
that.
sense. It was so
Did
bizarre.
you have to call in and apologize to him?
I ended up having to apologize to everyone in person when I came back, but by that point, I was enjoying wrestling too much. I wasn't going to let that bother me.
My God, that's
But
hilarious, though.
yeah, that was a bizarre time in wrestling.
When isn't it a bizarre time in wrestling, though? And that's why we stay around, because we're bizarre and it fits us.
Yeah, we can't do any other jobs.
No, well, I'm trying, I'm trying, man. What's like physically keeps you physically fit and like forces you to do that, as well as like you get to design your outfit, as well as you get to design your T-shirt, as well as you get to design like your music if you want to. You get to design how you walk. Like acting's great, but they're going to tell you what to do. There's a lot more, and this is what you're going to wear, and this is what you're going to say. We get to write all that stuff. Yeah, well, like rock stars, comedians, and wrestlers are the only ones that get to write and perform their own material. Very few other people get to do that. So,
And you get the
and
feedback
personal
from the
trainers.
live crowd.
Yeah.
That's what actually we had. I don't know if you've seen the new Kickboxers, but we had Alain Moussi, has Jean Claude Van Damme's role in the new Kickboxers, and he participated on one of our events this year. And he couldn't believe the rush that he got from the crowd. And he said, "You don't get this from acting." He said it
No,
was
exactly. There's nothing else like it, man. Like I love acting and I'd love to do more of it for sure because you can't sadly wrestle forever. But if we could, man, oh, that sounds so great.
And for anyone listening to this, where can they follow you? I know you have a Facebook page.
I definitely have a Facebook page. You can find me at the Weirdo Hero on Instagram, as well as I think on Twitter I'm at Ravenous Randy. So you can find me. I'm out there, and I'd like you to follow me because I'm already following you.
There you go, fans. Check it out. And hopefully, we'll have Randy in Great North Wrestling in the future. And I hope that you
Hell
actually
yeah.
get another chance with Impact now that we hear that they're slowly going to become more and more of a Canadian company.
Be
So,
awesome.
yeah.
Then we'll wrestle for Impact. We'll go over to New Japan. We'll wrestle for New Japan. We'll go down to PWG. We'll go wrestle everywhere in the world, Devin. Woo!
I think it's a good thing that New Japan's going to expand into the U.S. and break that Ring of Honor deal because a lot of people don't realize that they have a deal with Ring of Honor that prevents. It's very difficult for anyone that's not in Ring of Honor to get in New Japan right now for that reason.
Mm,
And you were actually training, now that I remember this, with Tokyo Joe, who trained Harry and TJ and Natty for Japan, right? At one point.
totally, yeah.
Yeah.
As well as Rick Victor or Eric,
Oh,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
How
that
was?
was awesome. Like that was without that, I don't. Again, it's another thing that made me who I am. That really enforced like the heavy sport and long bridging and like 3 hours of exercise followed up with like 4 or 5 hours of wrestling in the ring. just going until you couldn't go anymore, and then going for like another 3 hours.
Didn't he? There was another guy that ended up getting out of the wrestling business, Dave Swift. Didn't he end up choking out Dave Swift on one those practice sessions? And Tokyo Joe only had one leg, right?
Yeah, no. There's a couple times. So Joe didn't like anything to look like phony at all. Didn't like any holes in your holds. That's a really hard thing to say. Windows in your holds. He didn't like anything to look phony. So he didn't even like people going off the top rope. He was questionable about letting you whip people off the rope. So he liked everything to be very like ground-based, but still with suplexes as well. So it was very, very particular. And one day Dave had a hold on that wasn't quite snug enough for Joe's liking. So he called Dave over. Again, Joe only had the one leg. So Joe like sat behind Dave, and then he just like put on his holds and knocked him out. A funny story about Dave is one time he got, in my very green days, I botched some spot. Not saying I still don't do that.
He was abusive when you were green wrestling him, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Me as well.
Botched a spot. He like laid me down with his body slam. Steady. Went to the top rope and hit me with a big back senton off the top rope. But he came down with such force that he actually knocked himself out. So there I am laying underneath him, and he's just dead weight on top of me and tried to stiff me. It was like solid, but he ended up knocking himself out. So
wasn't that at a high school or something?
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, I think it was at my high school.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Well, good riddance to that guy. I just remember he would be like, there's one thing stiffing people, but he would do unsafe stuff, and I was like too green to even realize what he was doing. But looking back on it, that's one guy I would love to have an MMA fight with, and it wouldn't last long.
No, I don't. Yeah, no.
But thanks a lot for speaking to us. I hope that you get something out of this heel kick movie and more acting opportunities. And
yeah, that'd be great. I got a great experience out of it, if nothing else. And that's all. The more experiences I can have, the rather it can be.
And that's going to be available on iTunes January 19th for anyone that wants to check that out. Okay. Randy mentioned to us where we can follow him. Is there anything you want to tell us as we to close the show off here?
What do I want to say? No, and you know what? Like I appreciate that you calling me, and I appreciate follows and people listening to this, and just be good to yourselves, people, and don't be a fuck. You know, I've really been trying to focus on that for a while, and I think I'm good.
Excellent. Best of luck to you and everyone listening. Don't forget to subscribe to the Hannibal TV and visit thehannibaltv.com to find out all the information about this podcast. Future interviews we have some big ones coming up. And definitely follow Randy Myers, the Ravenous one.
That's all for this episode of the Great North Wrestling Podcast. Be sure to visit thehannibaltv.com for Great North Wrestling news, links, and live event information. Subscribe to the Hannibal TV on YouTube and subscribe to the GNW podcast at greatnorthwrestling.podomatic.com for instant downloads of our latest audio content.